Let me know if you know the scenario. We come home after an amazing session, everything went completely like we wanted it to, and just to find out when we pull up the portraits on our computer that some of our favorite shots was completely out of focus. In this video, I'm going to teach you 8 tips on how to achieve sharp portraits with the eyes in focus. I think I just ate a bug. Number 1, in your camera, when you set your focus points, make sure to set it as single spot autofocus. That way your autofocus becomes way more precise. And when you shoot your portraits, make sure to place the focus point right in the center of the eyes. That way your eyes will come out completely sharp, and depending on your settings, the rest of the face will too. On older cameras you might not be able to do that the same way, so make sure to use your center focal point in your camera. That's the strongest focus point in your camera. And again, place it in the middle of the eye. If you use your center focal point on an older camera, you can either use 2 techniques in order to recomposition your image. So either you place your focal point right in the eye, hold down the shutter halfway, and then reposition the camera in order to get the composition that you want. You can also use a technique called back button focus, and most cameras have a little button on the back of the camera that says AF on, and that is a technique that you can use to do this exact same thing. I personally prefer to use the half shutter down recomposition way, but sometimes that can be a little faulty, and it's widely debated whether that is the best way to do it or not. It's the way I used to do it with my old Canon 5D Mark II, but now with my Canon R, I don't have to do it that way anymore. I just use the single spot autofocus setting in my camera, and then sometimes I use the back of my screen to press where I want my focal point to go. It's quite easy that way. My number 2 trick for you today is distance. The closer you are to your model, the more difficult it is for you to get the entire face sharp. I don't know if you guys tried this. It happens to me all the time. I go in nice and close with my camera, focus on the eye, eyes sharp, but the nose is completely blurry. Sometimes I allow it, and that's mainly because I really like to go in close. But if you want to avoid that, step away from your model. That way your camera has a better chance of achieving sharp images. Number 3, you need to keep your camera steady. Now the easiest way to do this is placing your camera on a tripod. That will make sure that any motion blur that you have is not going to be transferred into your camera, into your image. Now, not everyone have the option of using a tripod, and frankly I rarely use tripods to take portraits with, so they can be a little bit difficult to move around, shooting up or down, like it's difficult to get the right angles in. In those situations you have to keep your stand steady. Now you do that by pressing your elbows close to your body and make sure that your breath is under control. That's going to help you reduce any type of motion blur when you release the shutter. And now modern cameras are also much better at getting rid of motion blur, so it is easier if you use a newer camera. But if that's not an option, either use a tripod or make sure that you know how to keep your body calm. Number 4, make sure to shoot with a faster shutter speed. I like to shoot at around 1/250 as my minimum. Sometimes, depending on my subject, I will shoot below that. However, the faster the shutter, the more likeliness is that you're going to reduce the motion blur from your hands and your general movement. This especially goes really well if you're trying to shoot at a very wide aperture. So let's say you're trying to shoot wide open, maybe at an aperture about like 1.4 to 2.8. You need as much reduction of motion blur as possible. So shooting with a faster shutter speed in those situations will help you out greatly. Which brings me straight to number 5. Shoot with a higher aperture. Now I like to have an aperture between 4 to 6.3, and that way I'm still going to get a nice blurry backdrop, but the face is going to have much more focus on it. And now this is especially important if you're shooting multiple people. If you shoot wide open while taking a picture of multiple people, the focusing plane is going to be much smaller, which means that the people behind the person you're focusing on is going to be completely out of focus. Now one way to help with that is to keep all your subjects on the same focal plane. So have them right next to each other, and that might not always work. But this also goes if you are shooting wide open and you're shooting a close-up portrait and you're focusing on this eye. You should in general focus on the eye that's closest to you. But at a wide aperture, if you focus on this eye, the back eye is not going to be sharp, simply because the eyes are not on the same focal plane. If you like this video, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to make sure to put out more content for you so you can become a better portrait photographer. Number 6, have good light. Now this is incredibly important to maintain sharp portraits. If you're shooting in low light, your camera's going to have a really tough time autofocusing. So make sure you have plenty of light to shoot with. Now this can either be using artificial light like speed lights, strobes, etc. or it can be using natural light we have around us. If you're shooting in low light, your camera's going to start hunting for the subject. It's going to have a really tough time autofocusing, and that's going to make it really difficult to grab a sharp image. You're also more likely to have a high ISO, which is going to introduce noise into your image. And personally, I love a little bit of noise here and there, but too much noise will definitely affect the sharpness of your image. Number 7, if you want to make sure, really want to make sure that you have that specific shot perfect, grab a few extra. Now what I mean with that is, if you have a pose, if you have the right lighting, everything is just playing in the right way, grab a few extra shots. That way, when you come home, you sit in front of the computer with the portraits, you're more likely to have at least one shot of those where the eyes is completely in focus. Now last but not least, number 8. This one is a little easy to forget, at least for me. I always forget this, but keep your gear clean. Make sure that you have a dust cloth in your camera bag, because keeping your gear clean and free of dust is definitely going to help you achieve sharper images. If your lens have a ton of specks and dust covering it, then you're risking on reducing the quality of your portraits. So make sure to keep your gear clean. That's it for now, guys. I hope that you could use my 8 tips to keep your portraits sharp. And let me know if there's any videos that you want me to make in the future in the comments below. Please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Until then, have a beautiful day.